everything in show business is also show business. So it's a business of manipulators. Like, we are manipulating the audience the whole time. Like, we're telling them a story and taking them for a ride, and we're manipulating them into kind of this state of mind, which is like going to experience our comedy the way we want it to. The studios what they care about is that people pay to see the movie. And so we're, in a way, we're manipulating them into thinking that we are making the thing that our audience is going to appeal to and going to.
Hello, this is Robinson Earhart here with the introduction to Robinson's podcast, number 211. And this episode is with Jay Chandrasekhar, who is a director, a writer, an actor, a comedian, and also a podcaster. Some of his works include writing, along with his comedy troupe, Broken Lizard, Supertroopers, Club Dread, and Beerfest, directing Dukes of Hazzard and episodes of TV shows like Arrested Development, Community, and New Girl. There are links to his book, Mustache Shenanigans, and his podcast, Mustache Tales, in the description, along with the awesome opening scene to Supertroopers on YouTube, if you haven't seen it, because we do talk about it. And obviously, this is terra incognita for the show, as Jay is my first comedian on the podcast, and I could not be more happy about that. But in this episode, we talk about Jay's growth as a writer, the importance of purpose in comedy and film, dealing with creative integrity in Hollywood, working on Supertroopers, and then, which was particularly fun for me, his time working with Johnny Knoxville and the Jackass Crew. There is also a link to the Patreon for this show in the description if you would like a link to an ad-free RSS feed as well as some show notes. There is also currently a post up for a forthcoming AMA, Ask Me Anything episode that will come out in the beginning of July, and it should be up there for another couple of weeks. If you would like to ask questions, you do not have to be a member of the Patreon to ask questions for this go-around. And now, without any further ado, I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it with Jay. I first saw your movies when I was probably 11 or 12. One of my still closest friends, because it was clearly a vital bonding experience, Corey McDermott and I, we used to watch them at sleepovers after soccer. So it's funny that I only recently learned your real name from reading Mustache Shenanigans. And since I'm not very confident in my pronunciation, I mean, what is it? What does it mean?
Well, my full name is Jayanth Jambalingam Chandrasekhar, and the translation is Victorious Large Penis Rising Moon.
Mm-hmm.
It's a family name, Jambalingam. My dad has it. His dad has it. His dad had it. My son has it.
Oh, your son has it too.
Yeah. We're all Jambalingams.
The story in the book in which you learned it was pretty funny.
Well, I don't know. I mean, my name is 31 letters long, and it's long. I mean, my last name's 13 letters long. My middle name's 11 letters long. And so, because I was writing and directing and acting in the movies I had started to do, I just thought it was a little too much of my name up there. And so I was also editing it. And so I put my middle name as my editor's name, Jambalingam, edited by Jambalingam. And I figured out I might throw people off a little bit, whatever. They won't think I'm taking every credit in the movie. And one of my friends was watching the movie with his buddy who's Indian American and mother. And the mother saw Jambalingam and pointed at it and laughed. And my friend was like, "What?" And she goes, "Do you know what that means, Jambalingam?" And he said, "No." He goes, "Large penis." And so my friend immediately calls me and says, do you know what your middle name means? And I'm like, Power? And he goes, large penis. So I immediately called my mother and I'm like, does my middle name mean large penis? And she goes, well, literally, yes. And I'm like, Mom, why didn't you tell me? This would have helped.
I wanted to start by talking about Mustache Shenanigans. And do you think of it as, I guess, a memoir, just like a story of your career? How do you think about the book?
I'd never written a book before, but when I sat down to write that one, I realized, it's just a chronological telling of the stories that are of note that have happened to me. And I'm like, I might as well start at the beginning. And then you find yourself naturally gravitating towards, stories where you had pain or triumph. And then if you really think about what a reader would want to read, you go, they must probably want to read about the movies. Like I read Keith Richards' autobiography, and, the first 50 pages are of him as a lad in England. And you're like, when do we get into the Stones? Eventually you get to the Rolling Stones, like, this is the greatest. This is incredible. And so I try to keep the beginning part a little brief, if possible. And then, I told all the stories of basically how I got into show business, and then I talked about all the movies, each one of them, a story from all the movies. But I was never stuck in writing this book because all I had to do was just jump to the next thing that happened. I've written a novel, which, I've been writing it for about 4 years. And I believe I'm going to finish it tonight or tomorrow. I mean, I've written 12 drafts of it. It's been done. I've just been taking one last run through it before I try to sell it. And that is interesting because, you don't know where the next piece of the story necessarily goes. You have an idea, like, I think I want this to happen. But then you get there, you're like, I should do this instead. And then when you do that instead, you have to go back and fix all these ripples because things ripple and ripple and ripple in this kind of story. I find novel writing to be the most satisfying kind of storytelling of all, like better than filmmaking, better than stand-up. It's just my true joy. If I could, obviously I'm going to keep directing movies, but if I could, I would be a novelist who also directed movies in that order.
I'd like to talk more about your writing process at some point, but first I want to talk a bit more about Mustache Shenanigans. And there's the joke about your name is the one that Mustache Shenanigans begins with. And the first section of the book is really, really strong. Like, there are jokes, there are important life lessons, hints at crazy stories from show business. And I was wondering if, technique-wise, you put extra attention into making the beginning extremely powerful, because it seems like a lesson you learned from your filmmaking career that might have
Yeah, I mean, we made a film. I mean, I appreciate you saying that the opening is strong. In my mind, nobody's ever said that to me, or I've never really had an analysis of the book at all. I've talked to people about individual stories, but not structurally the opening. That's good. It's good to open well because you only have a little bit of time before people put you down. And if you didn't open well, they might put you down forever. In the movies, when we were starting out, we made a film called Puddle Cruiser, and we, in my view, the opening of that movie, I'd say the first 8-10 minutes are the weakest. And when we showed it at Sundance, it was quiet until the 10-minute mark, and then it took off like a rocket. I mean, and I don't even mean Sundance. Before that, we showed it at the Hamptons Film Festival, which we won. But we won it because the film became good after 10 minutes. And so we started, before every screening, we would do a little sketch. We'd bring out a ventriloquist dummy and guy at the UPS. I mean, we did a whole sketch to try to lube the audience up to get them through that first 10 minutes, and then the movie would take over. So when we made Supertroopers, we're like, we got to make a good opening for this movie so that we don't have to put the fucking ventriloquist dummy into the luggage. We don't want to use it anymore. And so we wrote this scene, and look, Miramax at the time is the company that paid us to write that movie. And the head of production there was like, I don't think you can open a movie on kids when they're not the stars of the movie. And we were like, yeah, but we're in the scene. And they're like, I know, but it seems like it's a movie about these 3 high school kids. And I said, well, for a moment it is. Like, what the audience to feel like they're getting pulled over by cops. And then eventually you'll realize, oh, this is a movie about the cops. And people are like, I don't think you can do that. Like, many people in Hollywood told us, I don't think you can do that. And we were rattled a little bit, but we were like, nobody financed it who told us, I don't think you can do that. The guy who financed it didn't have a clue how to make movies. So he was like, well, good to me. And we were like, fuck it. So we just shot that opening. And then when I first, we watched it at the film lab the day we were flying out to Sundance. I mean, the day. And I was watching it with Kevin Efford, who played Farva, and I'm like, we played that opening scene, and we had our bags packed at the film lab, Duart Film Lab in Midtown, Manhattan. And I'm like, stop the film. Stop it. And the projectionist stopped it, and I look at Kevin, I'm like, it's fucking terrible. The opening of this movie, Supertroopers, is fucking terrible. And I don't know why I acted like that. I don't know what this thing, people were right. You can't open a movie like this. This is fucking idiotic. I said, here's what we're going to do. We'll watch the rest of it, fine, but we got to go back home, get the ventriloquist dummy, because we're doing that stupid sketch again tomorrow night in Utah, again, because we fucked up. I said, the rest of the movie's good. I got it. The rest of the movie, it, to me, seems good to me. I don't know. Nobody'd seen it. And then we went to Utah the next night and showed the movie, and the opening 10 minutes, it was like a laugh bomb went off in Park City at the Egyptian. It was like, you couldn't believe how much people were laughing. And I was like, oh. And that opening bought us goodwill throughout the whole movie. People were like, you got to see the opening. And then people are like, well, I got to see the whole movie, because the movie just, because of the good opening, it rolls. So everything we do, we're trying now. We call it sort of like a James Bond comedy opening. We're trying to go to do what they did in the Bond movies, which is like wow you with a scene that maybe is not even connected to the movie, really. It's more like, here's some funny shit, and now we'll get into the movie after that scene. This reminds me of the story, which is that Steven Spielberg wanted very much to direct a Bond movie, and the producers of that film were like, I don't think so. I don't think you know how to do a Bond movie. And so he was like, oh yeah, fuck you. So he and Lucas wrote the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is a James Bond opening. A scene that, sort of not really has anything to do with the movie. I mean, eventually you meet the bad guys, so you're like, okay, you kind of meet the French bad guy. But it's a full-on James Bond opening, and they've made that, and he was like, fuck you, I can't do a Bond movie. So, we looked at that, and we were like, okay, we're going to try to do that with our careers. Open big.
Yeah, and you've got a James Bond comedy opening in Club Dread as well. I think
right.
I've heard that.
That's right.
I recall reading in Mustache Shenanigans that it didn't go the way that you wanted it to. But for me and my friend, I mean, it's a classic opening, like Heads or Tails. I love that one.
Yeah, no, look, the opening of that movie, if you look at it from a acting perspective, the tone of the acting is different than the rest of the movie. It's bigger. It's overacted. It's intentionally poorly acted because we were mocking these horror movies. But in fact, we were a horror movie. Like, we were a horror movie with characters with fears, and, and the better way to make that opening would have been to take it seriously, and let the actors be great actors, and just kill them the way you do in a horror movie, and let the jokes be smaller. Like, oh, these three are going into that temple. Oh, no, I mean, like that stuff would have been the better way to make that. But instead, we just felt the need to be funnier, and we made them. I said, don't act well, act poorly. And then I think audiences who didn't know us were like, what the fuck is this? Like, why is everybody such a bad actor in this movie? And so a lot of people were like, Club Dread sucks because of this bad acting in the beginning. And then eventually people got what we were going for. And it has become, for a certain group of people, their favorite of our films. And those are the people I like most because they got it. They're like, oh, yeah, you were doing that thing. But given a chance to redo it, I would have redone it that way. And I asked the studio for a chance to redo it, and they're like, the movie's not testing well enough to put more money into it, and so they didn't.
The reason, all of this came up was, like I said, the beginning of the book, though it's not like a James Bond splashy sort of one-off thing. There's humor. There are these, I found really compelling psychological elements and lessons about dealing with rejection, which is a huge part of show business. And then you've got the exciting hints about crazy stories, maybe regarding working with the Jackass Crew or something else. And it's interesting that there's kind of this through line that I imagine goes for film or books, or maybe your comedy sets, your openers are particularly strong. That this is just a through line for all of these media endeavors.
I'm addicted to the goodwill we got from the Supertroopers opening, and so I'm going to continue to attempt some version of that, whatever it means. It's like I just shot a stand-up special, and the opening, story is it's strong in my view, and it's there for a reason. My opinion of my own comedy is worth not much, I suppose. But what I'm really telling you is, I've told this story in front of a lot of audiences, and it's strong. Like, the reaction is strong. And what happens, I think, is that they go, well, this actor just told us a strong comedic stand-up story. So I guess he knows how to do this. So I'm just going to relax now. I'm going to give up. We all go through these moments of judgment on everything we watch, right? We go the first few minutes of everything we watch for the first time. You're like, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. I heard it's good. And you watch it and you're like, oh yeah. Okay. It is good. For those who don't start big or don't start with start strong, they're swimming, they're swimming against a tide. And, it's why you see a lot of movies or television shows will start with a war scene, because they're like, let's razzle dazzle them, let's give them some pizzazz. But let me tell you one thing. When you finish writing a book, a memoir, you read it and you go, oh, those are the themes of my life. I didn't even know it. Once you read it, you're like, oh, this person who this book is about happens to be me, obviously. This is what they went through. This is what formed their views. And this colors the whole fucking story. And you go, oh. So then you go back and you go, these are the themes. You start to put the themes into all of the stories because they're already there. And you make them more bright light. The theme really of Mustache Shenanigans, in my view, was I was, my sister and I were the only brown kids in the entire neighborhood. And really for towns around, believe it, the only Indians we knew were our cousins. And so we, the Constitution, it says all men are created equal. And I was like, okay, I'm equal. But it's going to take me, I'm going to have to prove that, because there's already a reputation for nerdy Indians in this country. So I'm going to have to prove that I'm equal. And it was the driving force in my life. It still is. It still is. I mean, I always call myself the Jackie Robinson of Indian comics. Because I want all these, they all know. They like all these, like, Aziz and Mindy, they all know that I was first. They all know. But I want to make sure that everybody remembers. Ben Kingsley obviously did the drama first, but, I was the first comedian.
One of the things that really stuck out at me that you said a few minutes ago, and I'm not going to keep harping on the beginnings of movies and films and comedies and things like that, is that everything's there for a reason. And a good comedy set, it seems effortless, but every word and reaction is there for a reason because it was crafted, and that's what separates the good from the great. And I wonder if, as your skills have developed as a filmmaker, elements that once didn't have a purpose, like maybe in Puddle Cruiser, you just sort of like picked shots without thinking about them at all because they were easy. They've all become purposeful and well thought out, and then they contribute to the whole.
Yes. Like, it's a style of filmmaking that we employ now. Like, everything is there for a reason. Every shot, everything is there purposefully. Like in a stand-up set, every word is specifically purposeful. There are comics. I've talked to Adam Sandler about this because he was originally going to produce Beerfest. He was a big fan of Supertroopers, and he's a great guy, and he's like enormously successful, more so than we are. But I said to him, I'm like, because we were talking about a certain joke, and he goes, you should just, you should put that joke in. I'm like, somehow to me the joke kind of pierces the ceiling of our films tonally. Like, we have a bandwidth, and all the jokes have to fit within the bandwidth. And if something pops out of the top, it's probably not going to make the movie because it's like, well, just pierce the reality a little bit too much, right? If somebody, for example, sprouts wings and flies across the thing, you're like, I don't know, how did that happen? Do I believe any of the rest of this shit now? And we had a discussion, and I said, in our films we just keep it within this bandwidth. And he goes, in our films, if it's funny, it's in the movie. And I'm like, that's why you guys are way more successful than us. But it's a tonal thing, right? It's like he has a tone that works beautifully for his audiences. I mean, he's the number one guy on Netflix still. And we have a tone that is like, if it's funny and it fits the movie, then it's in our movie. I mean, he has some line too that it's like it's too stupid and he wouldn't put it in. I know he does, but his general overriding philosophy is, and some people are like that. Like, I think early Will Ferrell was a little more like, if it's funny, it's in the movie. Because I think Anchorman, you're like, there are certain improvs that seem to break the wall of the viewer's perception of what's going on, and yet they're incredibly funny. I love Anchorman. I love Step Brothers. But we are a little tighter, I think, a little more controlled, and frankly, a little less popular. What can I say? I mean, I don't give a fuck. I mean, I don't. It's just like a driving force as to each of us, Sandler, Farrell, we have a very specific opinion about what's funny, and that's it. And it's reflected in the films.
I definitely want to get back to being brown in the film business, and then also the not giving a fuck attitude, because obviously both of these things are vital to your success in certain ways. But one thing that jumps out at me from the conversation so far, I've been talking about this Adam Sandler story and then having to redesign your films because of audience expectations. This business seems like a minefield for creative integrity, and then dealing with producer notes and having to sell films. There are all these external pressures that seem just like designed to force you to compromise on your creative instincts. So how do you manage this?
Well, I always say to the people who work for me, I'm like, everything in show business is also show business. So it's a business of manipulators. Like, we are manipulating the audience the whole time. Like, we're telling them a story and taking them for a ride, and we're manipulating them into kind of this state of mind, which is like going to experience our comedy the way we want it to. The studios what they care about is that people pay to see the movie. And so we're, in a way, we're manipulating them into thinking that we are making the thing that our audience is going to appeal to and going to get them to pay to see the movie. So when there's a conflict over a joke, the answer is usually, if it's small enough, I go, okay, fine, we'll take it out. But we're really going to shoot this joke. Like, we're going to do it. Like, the studio person gave you the note is like, they feel good because you took the joke out. But we shoot the joke anyway. And then we put it into the cut. And when the audience laughs at it, if they do, that studio executive goes, I love that joke. And they don't necessarily, maybe they remember killing it. Maybe they don't. Usually they don't say, oh, I love that joke and I'm glad we kept it. It doesn't go that way. We just all move on. And if the joke's good and everyone's laughing and they're happy and we're happy, okay, fine. Like, you could fight to tooth and nail over these, whether to put a joke in or not. But as we've made 9-10 movies now, you're like, who gives a fuck? We'll take 5 extra minutes and shoot this joke. And we'll use it or we won't, but whatever, if it's an entirely different kind of, if they see a movie in an entirely different way, then the good move is to walk away, which we did with Beerfest. Sandler was in a meeting with us, and, the executive, he was more of a foodie at Sony, whatever. And he was like, I don't think these guys should be drinking light, like American domestic beer. They should be drinking like high class, like Stella Artois. And Sandler stands up and goes, Stella Artois? Do you even know what this fucking movie's about? And he's like, let's get out of here. And we leave. And I'm like, wow, that was fucking wild. Because we didn't have that kind of power. And then, we tried to set it up elsewhere. Didn't happen. But ultimately, he was right about, at the core, this executive at his core didn't understand what it meant to stay up till 5 a.m. playing beer pong and, throw it up in a garbage can. Like, he didn't know what that was. And if you don't know what that was, you may not be able to really understand what Beerfest really is. Like, I'm not saying you can't love it. I'm not saying you can't love it. People love it who don't drink, I suppose, right? But the ones who have been up late playing beer pong that late, they're like, wow, this is it. This is what happened. They created this out of that. And this guy didn't get that. And so we didn't make it. And I'm glad, because it would have been a lot of notes like that where you're like, you understand this is a movie about binge drinking? And to have it be anything but that is a disaster for this film. And so you gotta kind of, but that's why you work with people who you trust. And they work with you because they trust you. We're going to come in, you give Broken Lizard a budget, we're going to come in on it or under it. That's what we do. We're not the problem. Studio's not like, fucking Broken Lizard's over budget. Nobody's ever said it. Because we know that just causes trouble later. So we're just, we're on it, where you can trust us. And we're going to do some edgy jokes. And the way they trust us most is because the movies make money. And if they make money, then the studio executive looks good, and then they get promoted. And that's what you got to look at in show business. You got to go, okay, I'm working with this guy. How do I make this guy look good? Because if I make this guy look good to his bosses, then he'll want to work with me again. The best way is box office, but, you know, there are a lot of little ways. Coming in on budget, you know, getting rid of the joke the boss hates, but shooting it anyway. I mean, you know, we're manipulating each other. I'm manipulating them. They're manipulating me. And at the end of the day, you know, we make a movie that we want to make and we like. And if we have to fight at the end for the edit, fine, we'll fight.
Yeah, presumably you didn't get into show business to be involved in all of these political things and manipulations. Was that just part of the price you have to pay to end up making the art that you want to make? Or do you enjoy it now?
Well, you know, like there are things that, you know, there are patterns in my life that I have noticed, right? One of them is I'm a golf fanatic. I play 7 days a week and have for, you know, since COVID, but I've had 3 other golf addictions in my life where I played basically 5-6 times a week. Now it's 7. I played 750 out of the last 850 days, like just every day. And it's a complex, like golf is like a physical manifestation of a complex mathematical set of equations, really. Like, you know, each club goes a different distance. You can make it go. There's a variation on, you know, on how far you can hit it. You can open the face and make it go less far. You can close the face and pull it in around this way, or pull it. It's geometry. It's like advanced math, and it really satisfies my brain. I also love chess. I also love novel writing, which is the same thing. It's like complex equations that you're setting up and paying off, and, you know, there are surprises. And then politics of show business, same thing. You're kind of like working angles. You have people on your behalf working angles. You're planting little ideas to try to manipulate them down the road. They're trying to manipulate you. It's like this complex equation game, and that's what I'm into. The movies are the same. Directing movies is the same. It's like, you know, hundreds of little tiny decisions to manipulate the audience into feeling a certain way.
So I know that there are novelists. Think of there being 2 kinds of novelists. There are plotters and there are pantsers. So plotters outline, they know what they're going to write before they write it. Joyce Carol Oates, for instance, what she told me is she goes for, I'm not sure if it was bike rides or walks, but in her mind or written down, she has voluminous notes, and writing the novel comes very quickly because it's already fully formed in her mind. Whereas a pantser just goes by the seat of their pants, just starts writing, churns out the first draft, and then tinkers with it. And I'm wondering which one you are as a...
I used to be a pantser when it came to movie writing. And now we plot it all out exactly and then write it and go, and then we tinker it from there. I mean, it's a much better way to make movies. Book, you know, I had a beginning of a story. I knew where I wanted it to end, how it should end, generally. And so what it said with this book, I said, I'm going to do the first 12. I'm going to plot out the first 12 chapters because the you know, you discover roads, you discover little pathways that you didn't realize were there. And you kind of, so I wrote to the end of 12 and I'm like, it's obvious where the next 12 need to go. And so I wrote those, I outlined those 12 and I'm like, okay. And I would get to 10 and be like, I don't want to go to 11. I want to go this way. And so I'd start to redo, you know, the end of the outline and go back and fix all these things. And eventually I got to the end where I had already thought I wanted to get to. And it ended the way it still ends the way I wanted it to, plus a couple extra scenes that, you know, wrap things up. But yeah, you have to, I don't, you know, like putting a whole, there are 70 chapters over 375 pages in the scene. So, you know, like Joyce Carol Oates is a much more experienced novelist than I am. So maybe that's where I will get to when I write a second or third or fourth novel. But I like this like this method a lot. Like it's like plotting and pantsing and then plotting and then, like a little of all of it. But mostly plot. It's mostly plotted out before I sit down and write. I have an idea for a show business novel, and I don't really know what it's going to be yet. But I have I think it would be interesting to write a novel about show business when you are like, I'm a consummate insider. Like I could write, like The Player is you ever see that film?
I don't think so.
The Player is a movie that Robert Altman made about show business. And Robert Altman is a consummate insider. And so all the dialogue is just so specific to show business. And there's a murder in the middle of the movie, and the main executive he's a writer's executive. He develops movies, and he's the one who's accused of murder. And so it's like a story within a story, and it's like super. It's very good. Anyway, I'm fishing around for a new novel idea, and that might be it. I just don't know where. I don't know what yet.
Well, I know. Okay, in addition to the things we've already talked about, film, novels, stand-up, you also direct TV, but then you also, and I think you might have just mentioned this offhand, you have a podcast, Mustache Tales.
Yeah.
Which I'm the one with the mustache.
Ironically, how about it?
But does what you've learned in these other areas translate at all to podcasting? Do plotting and pantsing translate over, or is it just completely different or completely easy? You don't even have to think of it as an artistic medium?
No, podcasting to me, the more you know about the person, the better. The more prepared you are to bring up the stories that you think are most interesting about that person, the better. Sometimes I'll call the guest before and go, number one, what do you want to promote? Because it's why they're there, right? And number two, are there any stories that I don't know that you want to tell? And then I'll ask them about that story as though I knew about it. But it's, I'll do my research on the internet and go, oh yeah, they were, they took karate and they did this, and whatever's interesting to me, I'll ask about. And the more you seem to have worked on it, the more they open up. And the more you tell them, hey, anything you don't like, we'll just cut out. I don't give a fuck, and they go, okay. Then they open up. My personal philosophy of comedy is that you can be either funny or honest. You can be both, but it's just as entertaining to be honest as it is to be funny. Like if you tell an honest story, you scratch the same itch. People are like, oh, they're listening. They want to hear about it. You don't have to be funny to be entertaining. And I think I really learned that from like the latest incarnation of Howard Stern. He in the 80s and 90s to some degree, a great degree, he was a little bit threatening to me. Like he was like into, like skating the racial line, I thought, quite a bit. And treated, in my view, treated women in a certain way that I thought was like not really how I was raised, but it was entertainment to him. As it turns out, now he's evolved into like this highly intellectual guy who does treat women well, but also admits to being a voracious sexual animal and objectifies them while also treating them well, and has abandoned the race stuff. But the most important thing is he just tells the stories honestly. And sometimes they're really funny, and sometimes they're just really honest. And you go, I'm entertained even on the honest stories that are not funny. And I'm like, huh. So when I wrote that book, I actually dedicated that book to Howard Stern because I'm like, this is exactly, obviously I'm not Howard Stern, but I took his unspoken philosophy of entertainment and interpreted it for myself. He's the reason why Mustache Shenanigans is what, if it, to me, I'm like, okay, everything I write is going to be honest first. And if it's funny, fine. If it's not, fine, fuck it. It works for Stern, it can work for me.
Speaking of stories, I mean, one for people who haven't seen Supertroopers, they ought to just watch that opening scene. But the other...
Yeah, if you don't like that opening scene, you can turn it off.
Yeah. But I mean, it's on YouTube, so they could find it quite easily. But the other thing for me that sticks out most that has you in it, so speaking of stories, is your participation in, I think it was Jackass 2, in the Terror Taxi skit. So I would love to just hear about this. In part, it's funny because you mentioned, again, being brown in show business and being worried about being typecast as a terrorist, especially after September 11th. So it's funny that you're the opposite in this skit. But especially for people who haven't seen it, they can search it on YouTube. But what was it like working with these guys and being part of this skit?
Well, Knoxville and I, we were down in Baton Rouge together, and we were, two different versions of a similar animal. Like, we were just, we had a big studio budget behind us. We were in a small college town, and he and I basically went out every night, like every single goddamn night, and had a ball, like got into wild, weird adventures. And, part of what his thing is, they pull gags on people. They trick them, they hit them with shit, they drop pills into their drinks, they just fucking do shit like that. And he would hit me in the nuts repeatedly, and I would hit him back in the nuts repeatedly. But it'd be a surprise moment. It would be like I'd be giving this emotional speech to the crew, thanking him for all the help, and he'd drill me in the nuts. And you're like, this fucking guy. And then the other thing was, like, whenever if you went into a porta potty, he was going to flip it.
We're not like that in philosophy departments.
And I saw Sean Lipscott going to porta potty, and I'm using this guy. I'm shooting with this guy, and Knoxville's like rocking this fucking thing, and Sean is, and I'm like, I don't have time for you to get shit all over this guy. You cannot flip it. And he's negotiating with me outside as and he's holding it, and I'm like, it's funny, it's great, but you can't flip it. And he doesn't flip it. And he gets it. And Sean gets out of there. He's like, oh my God. And so, fine. Now we're done with the movie, and it went well and all that, right? Made money. We were a success in Warner Brothers size. And so now it's like a year and a half later or so, I don't know the timetable, and Knoxville calls me. And we're buddies. Like, we hang out, we go to parties together, we whatever. And he's like, hey, I need you to come over to the house to talk about a thing we're going to do in Jackass 2. It's called Terror Taxi. And I'm a huge Jackass fan. Like, only the movies, because when I saw the show, I was like, I don't know, it doesn't really seem like something I would like. So I never watched it. Then I went to see the movie. I was like, oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. So, I mean, just the greatest thing I've ever seen. I couldn't believe how funny it was. So he's like, hey, you want to, I have a thing for you to do in number 2. And he goes, you have to play, what I need you to do is play a taxi driver. And so immediately I'm like, well, I don't want to be the Indian guy playing the taxi driver. Even though, what's wrong with that? But I'd already made a career as an actor. Like I'm the one who broke the boundary of what Indians can do. I did it for myself. I'm like, I'm going to play this character. I'll play that character. And it was fine. And it's done. It's already done. I did it. But still, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to play a taxi guy. Well, maybe. Fuck it. I'll come talk to you. So I go to his house, and he's there with Spike Jones. And they're like, okay, here's the deal. Aaron Danger, I don't know, is his name Robinson? I know that's
I don't think so.
It's not? Aaron Danger something, right?
Okay, look it up.
Yeah. His middle name's Danger. And
McGaley,
right? That's right. They're like, we're going to pull a very complex prank on him. And it requires, acting. And so what we need from you is you're going to be the cab driver. And you're just going to, whatever. Don't worry about that. We are going to put Aaron into a dynamite vest, and we're going to cut our pubic hairs and create a beard for him. He's not going to know it's pubic hair. We're going to create a fake beard for him. He is going to have like a Middle Eastern accent. We're going to put a cuff, whatever that thing is, on your head. And one of the other guys is going to be holding a camera next to him in the same, all that shit, all the whole war robes and beard. And in Aaron's mind, he's going to the Burbank airport with a dynamite vest on, and he's going to dick around with the travelers. And we're going to, in his mind, we're doing hidden camera, him dicking around with travelers at Burbank airport.
I can't believe he bought that, but then it is Jackass. So.
Yeah, and he goes, and they go, but look, if he goes to Burbank airport, we've talked to the FBI, they're going to shoot him. They'll shoot him. So you're the cab driver. You're going to pick him up. He's going to tell you, take me to the Burbank airport. And on the way, he's going to fuck with you. He's going to sort of fuck with you as a little snack before he gets to the Burbank airport. And he's going to make jokes about blowing up planes. And you're going to see the dynamite vest. And you're going to drive right by Burbank airport and never get near it. Because if you do, you guys, the FBI's following us in this thing. They're going to pull it over. Gag will be over. He's never getting to the Burbank airport. And you're never getting to the Burbank airport. In fact, what they said, I misspoke. They're like, you can't even drive near the Burbank airport. It's not allowed. And so I'm like, okay, so you could be on your way, and then he's going to insult you so much that you're going to screech off, pull into an alley, and you're going to turn around, you're going to punch him in the face. And the goal of the punch is going to be to disorient him and make him feel like you control him as an animal. The way people kind of control, like when one animal dominates another, right? He goes, you got to punch this guy in the face. He'll be disoriented. You're going to get out. You're going to pull a fake gun. You're going to drag him out of the car. You're going to stomp him with your feet to make sure he's further dominated. You're going to put that gun in his face. And you're going to get him into the trunk of the car. And then close it, and you're done. And I'm like, are you out of your fucking mind? You want me to do all? How the fuck am I going to do? They're like, he's not going to even. I said, first of all, I'm in Supertroopers, motherfucker. Like, this generation of boys knows me. And he goes, yeah. But he's going to be so up his own ass, thinking about his accent and what he's got to do. He's not even going to see you. You're going to be an invisible Indian cab driver to him. And I'm like, you want me to do an accent? They're like, we thought about it, but we think it's better you just play it your voice. And they were like, and I'm like, I said, here's the problem. I said, you motherfuckers, I know what you guys are up to. This is some bullshit to fucking con me. And you're going to fucking con me. I'm the fucking mark. He's not the mark. I'm the fucking mark. And they're like, normally you'd be right. Normally we'd be here to fuck you over. But this time we're fucking him over. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. But I know you're going to fuck me over. I know you. And you're going to, yep, normally we would. But this time we're not. And Spike is like, yeah, man, we're going to fucking, it's going to be great. And you're like, okay, sure. And so I'm wary. And on the day of it, I come over and they're like, hey, do you mind if, do you have pubes, right? And I'm like, yeah. Like, do you mind if we get some pubes so we can put them on his, it'll be a little funnier if your pubes are on there too. And I'm like, yeah, okay. They're like, do you mind if we send a camera in there with you? I'm like, yeah, okay. So you go in there, you're shaving your pubes, and the cameraman's going, oh, you know, and I hit my dick. I'm in show business. I know what I'm doing. And they took the pubes and added some last minute black pubes to his beard. And then we did it. And, you know, I picked him up, and he started insulting me and my wife and the country and talking about blowing up planes. And I got lost. I'm following a van with all the equipment in it, and Knoxville and Spike and all those guys are in that van with listening equipment and the cameras for the taxi. And I get lost, and the van's behind me. So I'm leading this thing, and I'm like, I don't know where the fucking alley is. And I realize I'm driving by the Burbank airport. And I don't have an earpiece. I'm like, holy fucking shit, the FBI's going to fucking take this thing down. So I'm flooring it. And I floor it, and the guy's like, hey, there's the airport. Like, he's trying to get me to stop at the airport. And I'm clearly blowing by the airport, which is not the plan. And then the van speeds ahead of me, and I'm like, oh, and they lead me to the alley, and he's screaming, we got to go back to the airport, right? And I fucking go into that alley. And what I said to those guys was, if I'm an actor, right? If you tell me to punch a guy in the face, I will do it. I said, but is it totally, I mean, I'm going to hurt him. You know, like I might bloody his nose, because if you really want me to dominate him, I'm gonna have to make it painful a little bit. And he goes, and Spike is like, he's probably right. I mean, what if he just bitch slapped him? And I'm like, okay, I could do that. So I did. I bitch slapped him, and I pulled him out, and I did stomp him, because I'm like, that feels a little less brutal than me punching a guy in the face who doesn't expect it. Let's be honest. I don't really want to sucker punch it. But the thing that was so funny was that what he was most worried about was that the cab driver would have a gun. And he said to Spike and Johnny, Danger Aaron did, he said, this guy's going to have a gun. And they're like, no. We cleared it with the cab company. This is a guy from the cab company who does not have a gun. We cleared it with the cab company. So when I pull the gun, he's like, I knew he'd have a gun. I don't know if you can remember that, but he says that. And then I put, you know, when you have a gun put in a guy's face and you've hit him and kicked him and stomped him, it worked. It dominated. I dominated him mentally, and I got him to get in the fucking truck. And they were, you know, and then the guys ran in after that, and they take these 2 blocks of wood, and we're all yelling over each other like there's something, and he goes boom, boom, like it's a gunshot, and you can hear him freaking out of the thing. And then a driver came in and pulled donuts, and then we opened it up, and he's like dizzy, and we're all standing there laughing. And then he looks at me, he goes, wait, are you an actor? And I'm like, come on, right? What do you mean? I mean, I made Supertroopers, motherfucker. But it went off just so beautifully. And then we told him, you know, that the pubic hair on his face was, the hair on his face was our pubic hair, and he threw up. And it was like, how could it go better than that? Like it went so well that it almost, like, some people are like, come on, was it fake? Was it really? Was it just fake? And I'm like, no. I mean, no. It was fucking 100% real. And Knoxville and Spike, they're true artists. Like they're like these artists who do these insane stunts. And so, the story I always tell is that Knoxville was doing, I think it was Jackass 2 that opens with him blindfolded with a cigarette in a bull ring. And it might be 2, might be 3, I don't know. But he's standing there, and, you know, they're about to loose the bull, and the bull's fucking agitated already. They've made sure of that. And it just starts drizzling in a minor way. It's minor drizzling. And they loose the bull fucking flips, hits Knoxville in the knees, flips him, right? And he gets up, and everyone's like, yeah, you fucking did it. It was fucking great. And he looks at the end of that cigarette, and he sees that there's a drop of water right at the end of the cigarette. And he goes, was this cigarette smoking when that bull hit me? And everyone's like, yeah, it's fucking smoking it. You're smoking it. And then he's like, no. At the moment the bull hit me, was this cigarette smoking or not? And he goes, let's look at the fucking tape. So they go look at the tape, and a drop of water had landed and snuffed the cigarette out, I mean, moments before the bull hit him. And he goes, well, that's not the fucking joke. He goes, that's not the joke. The joke is there's this guy smoking a cigarette, and then he's shot while he's smoking. So that's the fucking joke. So let's do it again. And so he fucking put the blindfold on, light another cigarette, agitate that bull, and they fucking drill him again. And he goes, stands up, and he goes, now that's the joke. And you're like, wow, dude. I mean, we're committed to our jokes. We'll fight tooth and nail and manipulate and do everything we can to get the exact joke on screen. I recognized a brother in him when he did that, and clearly someone who's going further than we are. Because wow, I thought, wow.
If I were ever to receive the call to work with Jackass, it would be the most terrifying call I could imagine. But
it's terrifying. Yeah, it's terrifying because they're. You not only will you'll be the focus, you will experience physical pain. You know, if you got hit in the face with one of those huge boxing gloves, that's painful. While you're holding hot soup, I mean, that's painful.
Did you ever? I'm sure you did watch South Park, like at the beginning.
Yeah, I was around when South Park was created. I had nothing to do with it, but I mean. I was in LA pitching Supertroopers to the studios and any financiers, and we became friends. There was a VJ on MTV named Duff. And Duff, when we were moving from New York to LA, said, you got to meet my friend Amy Cohen. And I'm like, okay. So the first thing I did when I moved in, I roll it into LA, I call Amy Cohen. She's George Clooney's assistant. And she's like, it's like 6:30. We get to LA after driving cross country, and she goes, "What are you doing right now?" And I'm like, "We're pulling into the fucking place." She goes, "Okay, we're going to a park." And she comes over, picks us up, and drives us way up the fucking into the Hollywood Hills, and we end up at this party at the top of the fucking cliffs of Hollywood Hills, and I'm like, It's this guy, Trey Parker, and Matt Stone's house. And she's like, these guys are super funny. They have a little short film I'll show you another day. And so we're like, okay. And this, Trey Parker walks up with a bowl full of ecstasy, and we're like, all right. And we took ecstasy, and we're like, the sun came up. We were at another party. We're like, me and Steve Lemmy were like, oh, and there was a nude model swimming in the pool at this other party. And we were like standing there going, we kind of like LA. And shortly after, Amy showed us this a 90-second short, which was the characters from South Park. And it was George Clooney had paid them to make a Christmas card for him. And he sent that Christmas card out to everybody he knew in show business. It was a VHS videotape. And every single meeting we had for Supertroopers, they would go, have you seen this fucking Christmas card? I'm like, yeah, then let's see it again. And we watched it over and over and over. And out of that, they made that Comedy Central, like, let's make that show. And they made that show. And then they kind of.
Yeah, I just bring it up because there's this early classic episode that the Terror Taxi skit, part of it reminds me of, with the pubic hair, where this kid, an older kid, tricks Cartman into wearing like a beard or a mustache of his pubic hair.
No way.
And his name is Scott Tenorman. And then he ends up turning that kid's parents into chili and feeding them to him for revenge. It's a classic episode. But anyway, as you were telling this story, the story of Terror Taxi, I was just thinking, wow, this is an excellent professional storyteller. And at the beginning of your career, I mean, before your career, you already talked about how you were confident. I mean, your middle name is Huge Penis, and you were motivated. But did you already have this sort of natural talent, or is it something that you had to really work to develop?
I think I couldn't really tell you for sure. I would tell you this, that like I always got laughs from my friends and my mother and father, you know, and I definitely, you know, I would dress up in my mom's. Sometimes I'd put on like my mom's high heels and a hat and lipstick, and I would dress up. So I had some desire for show business or whatever, and it wasn't show business. I had desire for attention, I guess. And you know, I did that when I was like 5. I would put on the high heels and prance around with. And then I kind of, you know, I always got laughs, and so I eventually, you know, I had a rough freshman year in high school, and my sister was like, "Why don't you join the play and you meet a whole bunch of people?" And I'm like, "The play? I'm gonna be at a fucking play." And she goes, "It's a musical," and I'm like, "Oh, fucking musical, right?" And but I did it. I auditioned, and I ended up a Scottish clansman in the play Brigadoon, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of fun. And I met all these people, and we kind of go out there and perform, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of fun. It's kind of interesting. And eventually I fell for it. It was like super fun to do all that stuff. But the storytelling of it all, I have a feeling that storytelling is sort of like being able to sit at a piano and play songs you don't really know. You know, like I think it's like a part of like it's talent, right? It's like, and you get better and better at it once you start to see the mathematical structure of what a story is, right? It's built into the name of television, half-hour television comedy. It's built in sitcom, situation comedy. It's right there. And so you set up the situation and the comedy follows. And that's the truth of all stories. Every single story there is, you set up the situation and the comedy follows. And the great stories are all that. They're all the same thing. And it's true of stand-up acts. It's true of stand-up bits. You set up the situation and then, you know, the comedy follows it. And it's true of movies. See, the first act of the movie is the setup. All the jokes mostly happen in the second act. And then the third, you pay it off. It's a story. It's a long story. Of novel, it's the same thing. You set it up, boom, 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 pay it off. So I've gotten better at telling stories for sure, but I bet I was probably at least pretty good when I was younger. I mean, I have friends out here who are great storytellers, and it's the same method, right? They weren't taught the way I was. You know, they didn't learn how to tell stories because they're not writers. They're just people who are funny and tell stories. And you're like, oh, maybe I'm one of those people. Maybe I always was one of those people. Hard to say.
I know that for the most part, though, you didn't have formal education in these things. I think you did Second City, but you didn't go to film school, for instance. And I'm wondering...
I didn't get in.
Right, which says something, doesn't it? But if there's still a through line, again, to how you develop the skills that you do have, for instance, I mean, with filmmaking or joke writing or screenwriting, and whether or not there are principles that you think might apply to other people who want to develop a creative pursuit.
I mean, it's, you know, the hard part about show business is that it's the levers of how to make it. It's opaque. You know, you can't quite see how to do it. Like suddenly a movie shows up and you're like, how did that happen? You know, and you know, the way it happened is it started small. You know, it always starts small. Like I'll give you an example. Like I was golfing at a friend's birthday party at Lakeside Country Club, and I was on an 80-yard, well, it's called a par 3, whatever, and I hit exactly an 80-yard shot, and it landed next to the hole and sucked this way, left, and went right across the ridge of the hole and didn't go in. Almost a hole in one. Like, wouldn't have been. The caddy was jumping in the air. Everyone thought it was a hole in one. The guy behind me, I hear a guy saying, "Don't go in, don't go in." And I look at him, and it's a birthday boy. I'm like, "What do you mean, don't go in?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, right. No, I mean, I want you to get a hole in one, but the problem is at this club, if you get a hole in one, you have to drop your clubs, and a cart comes out and takes the foursome right to the Burbank airport, and there's a jet that we have access to. You fly straight to Las Vegas." And he goes, and then you have like a 4-day golf trip in Vegas. That's great. That would have been great. However, there are 36 other guys at this fucking birthday party, and I was going to have to pay for all of them to go to fucking Vegas with you because that's the right thing to do. And so I was like looking at it going, oh my God, this is about to cost me $40,000 or whatever. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I'm like, that's a funny idea, right? So I was like talking to my friend Kate Angelo, and I was like, here's what happened. Here's the story that happened. And I said, since Caddyshack, there's been there have been 2 great golf movies, in my view. And it's Caddyshack, and I'll put Happy Gilmore up there. And those are the 2 funniest golf movies, but they're also really good golf movies. And I said, to Kate, I'm like, let's make the second funniest golf movie of all time, right? And she goes, which one's the first? I'm like, depends on your generation. That's up to you. But that's how we're going to go walk around Hollywood and pitch it, and everyone will laugh at that part. Oh, second funniest. Okay. They make you guess which one you think is the funniest. And I'm like, and we'll open it with this thing where this guy gets a hole in one. But the big thing that all golfers want is they want to go play golf at St. Andrews in Scotland. That's the mecca of golf. That's where golf was created. Scotland, by sheep herders who were hitting rocks across the ground because they were bored herding sheep, and they said, oh, let's play this, made up a game with rocks and sticks, and it became golf. And I was like, this is the wish fulfillment thing of golf, is to go to Scotland. So instead, when this guy hits a hole in one, instead of going to Vegas, because it's on a certain day where the founder of the club was a Scottish guy, the old man of Carnoustie, this day, because he got a hole in one this day, the trip is to Scotland for a week to play the 8 greatest Scottish courses, and he gets to take 3 guys with him. And so everyone's like, yeah, we're going to Scotland. Now, in order to make a good R-rated movie, you need, in my view, salty language, you need sex, and you need, some version of alcohol and drugs. And I said, you could send a married guy over there and do the salty language and the drugs and booze. But the sex gets hard because the audience is like, wow, we don't really like him cheating on his wife, right? So we build in mechanisms to protect the character. And I'm like, okay, what if this is the day he gets a hole in the day before he's about to sign his divorce papers with his wife, right? And so we're going to send him to Scotland as a single man. And so we can do some sex over there. So we'll have sex, drugs, booze, and salty language. These are the minimums we require for an R-rated movie. And it'll be wish fulfillment, Scotland, da-da-da. And my friend Kate Angelo, who I wrote the movie with, she goes, how about this? There's a settlement for the divorce tomorrow. The 2 lawyers are meeting with the couple. And the last item on the split list is this trip, because now it's an asset. So the wife's like, I want half the fucking trip. So now the wife is going, and her buddy are flying to the UK to go to England to fuck guys, while he and one guy get to go to Scotland, and they meet up with a British guy and a Scottish guy who they know, and then it turns into like a whole, like The Hangover kind of, like, but the woman's over there and the guy's over there, and they're hooking up, and then they eventually get back together, and the audience is like, oh, they're back together, and it's like it's a way you try to create a thing. there are elements you need, sex, drugs, salty language, all that. So you're like, those are given. We have to have those. But how do we get to there? How do we tell this story and keep those stuff? And so then you kind of, you start weaving it. And we wrote a script, and now we're going to try to make it. It's storytelling at its core. You start with something funny, something interesting, something unique, and then you go from there. The first thing is the compelling thing, the reason why. It's like, I want to tell a story about golf, okay, but this hole-in-one thing is intriguing, okay, and now we'll make, then you just kind of, and if you really look at all the movies, they're all built into there's a 3-act structure that's hidden in the movie business. And it's basically in the first act, you meet the character and you find out what they want in life. Okay. So in this movie, this guy who gets the hole-in-one, he's playing golf with his buddies, and he goes, and his friend is single, and his friend's on Raya and Tinder, whatever, and he's hooking up. And this guy who's about to be single again is like, man, I want some strange again. I want to fucking get a new, I want to just be with a new woman. My God, that's what I fucking want. That's what I want. And I want to rage, and I want to party. I want to fucking go nuts. I want to go for it. I can't wait to be single again. And then, he becomes, so that's the first act. You find out what he wants. And then you also find out what the story might be. Oh, he's going to go to Scotland. Okay, that's the end. That's the first act. And then in Scotland, you see him play golf. You see him hook up, and then they get embroiled in a basically a cocaine distribution ring. That Brian Cox he's the bad guy in the movie. He's a Scottish guy, and there's a cocaine ring. And so they get embroiled in this whole thing, and the wife comes back in, and you're like, oh no, And then at the third act, at the end of the second act, you're watching this character. You're like, there's no way he's going to really get out of this. He's too deep. He's going to die. Something's going to happen. But in the third act, somehow he pulls it all together and saves the day and wins, right? And that's what all these movies are. Raiders of the Lost Ark is the best example. You open with Indiana Jones. You see he's a super cool guy. You get to know him. You're like, oh, he's a fucking swashbuckling dude. And then the next scene, he's a professor at the University of Chicago. And you're like, oh, he's like a real archaeologist. Oh, okay, this is cool. You're getting to know him. And then in the next scene, his boss is like, what do you know about the Ark of the Covenant? And he goes, it's hocus pocus. He goes, well, we think the Germans are about to find it. He goes, okay. So now the guy goes, the American government wants you to go find the Ark of the Covenant because you're the top archaeologist, swashbuckler. So that's the first act. Now, the second act, you watch him try to get the Ark of the Covenant. He goes to meet Marion, and they go together, and they have this little staff, this little headpiece that goes on a staff. He goes to Tunis, and eventually he gets the Ark, and you're like, yay, he did it. And you're only halfway through the movie. But then the Nazis take the Ark. They kill Marion, he thinks, his girlfriend. And at the end of the second act, which is page 90, first act is 1 to 20, 1 to page 20 page. Then 21 to 90 is the second act. That's where all the jokes happen, all the stuff. He loses the Ark, and he's sitting in a bar drunk, and he's like, fucked. My girlfriend's dead. They have the Ark. I'm fucked. I don't even know where it is. And then this Salah, his Egyptian buddy, goes, I hear the Ark is on this island of Tunis, whatever it is. And he goes, Tunis, huh? And so then you realize, oh, this guy's going to go for it. And so in the third act, he goes to Tunis, and he fucking holds the big gun on them, and he retakes the Ark, but he's unable to, whatever. And at the end of that thing, he saves Marion, she's alive, and he ends up with the Ark of the Covenant, and he takes it back to Chicago, right? And so you've seen this guy, you've met him, you learned he wanted the Ark of the Covenant, you watch him try to get it, he got it, he lost it, but then at the end he gets it, and he saves the day, and he gets the girl. That's movies. It's all movies. All of them. They're all the same. And that's what I'm trying to, when I tell a story, I'm structuring it in that way. All of them. Exactly that way.
Even though I would love to keep asking you about writing and movies and comedy, I think this is a great note on which to end. So again, thank you so much, Jay, for talking with me.
Thanks, you. I appreciate it. Thank you.